And you're listening to the Popcorn Conspiracy on centralcoastradio.com. Now we're going to turn our attention to another big blockbuster that is out in cinemas at the moment. That is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, which of course is written and directed by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. Now, this film centers around a bard and a former member of the Harpers called Edgin Darvis, played by Chris Pine, and a barbarian called Holger, played by Michelle Rodriguez. Now, when a heist goes horribly wrong, they find themselves in prison. And when they get out of prison, they go to return to Edwin's daughter, only to find that she is now staying with one of their former allies, Forge, played by Hugh Grant, who has brainwashed her against her father. So now, not only are they going to go and look for a relic that could bring Edwin's wife back to life, they're also going to have to defeat Forge to get his daughter back as well. And in order to do that, they team up with a wood elf enclave called Doric, played by Sophia Lillis, a sorcerer called Simon Amour, played by Justice Smith, and to make things even more difficult for them, Hugh Grant's character has actually teamed up with a red wizard of Thay called Safina, played by Daisy Head, that has given him a huge advantage because he has this kind of crazy evil wizard fighting for him. So it's an entertaining film, and it's one of those films that, of course, a lot of people have been looking forward to because it's based on the popular Dungeons and Dragons game series. But Kyle, what's your thoughts on Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves?
I really enjoyed this film. I'm actually surprised at how much I enjoyed it. There had been a previous attempt to make a Dungeons and Dragons film quite a few years ago, and that one was kind of a dud. So I know a lot of people are kind of worried that this would be history repeating itself on a grander scale, but no, I think that the movie really works really well. I was a huge fan of the film that the writer directors John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein made before this. A film called Game Night with Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams. And when I saw that movie, it was such a just the style of its action scenes and its comedy. I thought it was just such an entertaining, such a well directed, well paced film. And I was wondering, I'd really like to see what these guys could do if they had a huge budget behind them. And that's pretty much what this is. I was still a little bit worried, thinking that maybe with coming with a huge budget would also be kind of the studio breathing down their neck. Maybe I don't know. There's a lot of filmmakers that kind of that have that issue, like a studio hire like these really creative directors, but it's to pretty much just point the camera and shoot. They're not really given the proper freedom to work their style into the film. But no, I think that their style and what it is that made Game Night work so well works well with Dungeons and Dragons. Like, for one, something that I really liked with Game Night was it had such a huge cast of characters, and they're all kind of running around in this group, but they all had uh like unique voices, and they all kind of fit a purpose in the movie. None of them really blended into the background, and Dungeons and Dragons does this really well as well. Like the primary five characters all feel completely unique with their own specialities, kind of in line with what classes they represent, such as barbarian and bard and wizard. And yeah, like some are better at fighting than others, but then others are better at planning and problem solving. And so the whole team dynamic works really well when they're working together. Um, I thought the comedy throughout this movie was really great. I was laughing my ass off the whole way through it, and um, I thought that the writing was really clever as well, especially the way that they work magic and supernatural abilities into the various heists that the characters pull off throughout the movie. Like that was something that was really interesting. Kind of reminded me a bit of a little bit of Inception, the way that that was like a heist film with a difference. That's what this is as well. It's a lot of the films based around various heists that the characters have to pull off, and the way that they work magic into them is really, really creative and really interesting. I thought that the action sequences flowed really well. There's some long form scenes where it's at least shot to make it look like it's all done in one take, like you're following a single character throughout this long sequence of events. For one, Sophia Lillis's character is escaping from a castle, and it just in one shot as she's changing into various different characters that she can shapeshift into, various different animals and such. Yeah, it's flowing and following her around this entire through the castle and into the streets of the village beneath, and yeah, it really draws you in really well. Again, that was another thing that I really liked about Game Night, and this movie really manages to pull it off well also. Um, Something else that I really appreciated about the making of this film is that it actually looks like it was filmed outside. Um, a lot of huge budget fantasy movies nowadays, they look like they're filmed in a garage against a green screen. Like they look like they are in this sterile environment, not that the characters are actually outside in the air and in the elements. And that this movie does that. It kind of reminded me a lot of Lord of the Rings, like back to the old days of filmmaking, not where everything can just be filmed in up against a green screen and the backgrounds are put in later. So yeah, it kind of it really had this old school fantasy feel throughout the whole thing, and just even though I was never really a huge Dungeons and Dragons player, um, a friend of mine has been playing Dungeons and Dragons for over 40 years. And I thought that maybe if anyone was going to be a huge critic of this movie, it might have been him, just as being somebody that is so knowledgeable about the source material, and he loved it as well. So I think any way that I'm looking at this movie, just I think that they really pulled off a really great, funny, action-filled uh, fantasy adventure film. So I really, really enjoyed it.
And Lee, what did you think of this film?
Well, when I was going to watch it, I was a bit worried that having not been playing the game, that I might not get enough of it or understand enough of it or maybe enjoy it so much. But I can say definitely you can watch this film without having played the game. Now, I'm sure that those who do play the game are going to enjoy it a lot more, because they'll be familiar with characters or the happenings of what's going on. But I really enjoyed it. I loved the fantasy action of the film. I like the humor in the film. I had quite a few little laughs. And yeah, it had a real kind of Robin Hood feel to it in some ways, but a much more modern type of Robin Hood film. Just in the with the concept of the heist and thieves helping the poor. I thought the CGI was really good. I thought visually it looked fantastic throughout the film. And I think for me, one of the characters I liked most was Forge, which was Hugh Grant's character. I think he did a really good job. You could see him change throughout the film, and as the movie goes on. And yeah, for some reason, I was really drawn to his character. But I loved, as Kyle, you mentioned earlier, the shape shifting scenes in this movie. They were really fantastic, and just takes you back to other movies where you have, a lot of that fantasy, with all those beautiful creatures. And yeah, the way they change it so quickly is just done really well. It's done seamlessly, so it's directed really well, and visually it looks stunning.
Yeah, I agree. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I was excited by this film as soon as I saw the trailer, and but I was being really careful because like as Kyle will attest, the few times I was in the cinema with him and this trailer came on, I told him how excited I was about seeing this film, but I was kind of worried at the same time that it was going to be one of those films like Resident Evil or something where I'm one of those people that absolutely loves it. And most people are like, are you kidding? That film's really bad. So when I went into this, I was kind of nervous because I was thinking, oh, what if it doesn't live up to the trailer? Or I'm a huge Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez fan, so it was like, oh, I like both of them. So I was thinking, oh, what if this is the film that they've made and it's not going to be that good? But this movie just blew me away when I was watching it. I love the fact that it had so much fantasy element to it, but it also was different to other fantasy films that we've seen. It kind of had that humor that was in there in films like A Knight's Tale. And it really worked. Sometimes that can work really badly in a film. It can go horribly wrong for the filmmakers, but it did actually work this time around as well. There's really interesting characters in this as well. I think that was another part of it that I really liked was that the characters they weren't cliches. They had their own things about them. One of the characters I really loved was the character of Simon. Justice Smith's character. Yeah, this time he hasn't got any Pokemon, but he's got lots of other creatures around him. But I love that character in that he's the ancestor of this famous wizards, but at the start he's almost a kind of useless character because he doesn't believe in himself. He's got this magic ability, but he doesn't believe in his magic ability, and he's kind of like doing parlor shows when they get out of jail. And I like that there's character growth in this film. So all these things that you wouldn't expect from a film like this, but it feels almost like an episode of Game of Thrones with humor thrown in. Um, it's the only way I can kind of describe it because it does have all those layers to the different characters. Even the Red Wizard of Thay that I mentioned before, the character of Sophina, even though she's kind of like this character that's got not much backstory because she's just this evil villain that's there to team up with Forge, you kind of still feel that there's characterization there with her as well. Like even though she's so determined to like bring the downfall of this town, there's still something there about her character where it feels like no, a writer has actually worked on this character and has given layers to this character. Like Lee said, the character of Forge, played by Hugh Grant, once again, Hugh Grant plays this very British kind of villain, almost like his character in Operation Fortune, even though it's in the fantasy world, but he still does it amazingly well. And again, he's one of those villains where you can't help but think, you know what, I kind of like this character,
Still,
even though he's
definitely.
kind of vile with the stuff that he's doing. But look, I really hope they make another film in this franchise. I remember when I was walking out of the cinema of this one, I was like, man, I hope they do make another one of this. I hope it makes enough at the box office where they're like, yeah, we've got to make a sequel to this because I really, really loved it. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic fantasy film. I love the comedy element in it, and I can't wait to go back into this Dungeons and Dragons world. So, mate, I guess the big questions now is, what are you going to give this one out of five, Kyle?
I personally, I was going to give it a 4.5 out of 5, but then being that my friend who's been playing the series for so long loved it as much as he did, I've got to give this 5 out of 5. I was really blown away by just how entertaining this film was, and just like you, man, I'm so looking forward to any kind of follow-up that they do from this. I'd really love to see this go on to be a franchise. I really hope that this one's successful because I'd love to see a follow-up to this.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5 as well. I really, really loved it. And Lee, what are you going to give Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves?
I'm giving it 4 out of 5 as well.
Now, for all of everyone that's listening out there, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is on in all major cinemas at the moment. So make sure you check your local guides before heading out to the cinema to check out this film. You're listening to centralcoastradio.com, and we'll be back in just a moment with more Popcorn Conspiracy.